If you were a space alien looking down at planet Earth and you know that these humans are at war with each other, and you're thinking, I wonder which of these factions is going to win, I wouldn't fault you if you were thinking that the Putin, Xi, Kim, Ayatollah faction were the ones in the ascendancy. By every objective means, it looks like they are. And they just keep coming. And there were these massive strikes yesterday in Ukraine, and it looks like these guys had this huge parade, and it looks like they're just big and bad and powerful. And the West's response has been tepid in response. So I wouldn't fault you for that. So there's this massive strike in Ukraine last night. And the question I'm asking myself is why? What's going on? Like, Zelensky's supposed to meet with Trump tomorrow. I think that's one key. And I think there are others, and we're going to go through that here. But let's start with this very briefly, because I'm going to talk about this later on today. In a tightly choreographed show of force, China marked World War II's end with tanks and missiles, promoting its vision of a world order that challenges the U.S. and Western dominance. That's really what's happening here. That's really the big story behind even the war in Ukraine. There's a challenge by authoritarians of Western democracies. At the Grand Military Parade, China unveiled a DF-5C intercontinental nuclear missile said to be capable of striking anywhere on the planet. Ironically, the ceremony also ended with a release of 8,000 doves of peace. Okay. So, yeah. And then we see these Chinese drone systems at the World War II Victory Day parade as well. And so China is clearly trying to show that it's big and bad and tough as well. Okay. Now, what happened last night? As I was going to sleep, I was texting with Greg, he's in Ukraine, and man, it's hitting here. I'm seeing this on my feed while he's telling me about the hits. I heard the siren through a phone call with him yesterday. Air raid sirens are sounding in Kyiv due to Russian drone threat. Some residents are heading underground, preparing to spend the night in metro stations. And so I'm looking at that just before I go to sleep. And Ukrainian cities were under a massive combined attack last night. In Poland, they scrambled fighter jets for some reason I don't quite understand, because they weren't going to shoot anything down, even if it came into Polish airspace. So again, that's what I mean by, like, the West is just screaming weakness. It's very frustrating to watch. Okay, so what actually happened? There were 526 drones and missiles launched last night. 430 of 502 Shahed and other type drones, 14 out of 16 caliber cruise missiles, 7 out of 8 KH-101 cruise missiles. That's not a really good ratio. That's 85% was shot down. So that's not a great night. Nevertheless, they did hit 14 out of 16 caliber cruise missiles and 7 out of 8 KH-101. These missiles would have done far more damage than the Shaheds individually, at least. So at least they were doing that. But again, the ratio was just pretty poor. No sleep for Ukraine civilians as air raid alerts last a whole night. 500 plus drones. If you're keeping score at home, 500 drones has to be in the top 10. Like 500 drones and missiles is going to be like in the top 10 numbers of strikes. Last night, Russia struck Ukraine with modernized Shahed equipped with cameras and radio control. These Shaheds are getting better. And when I say better, I don't mean better for Ukraine. I mean more sophisticated technologically. This UAV can conduct reconnaissance and attack moving targets. They can be controlled online from Russia, says radio technology experts. So, yeah. So why are they doing it? That's my question. Well, part of the show of force. Part of it is also this, and this is the encouraging part. While making no progress at the front, Russia's attacks on Ukraine's civilian population only grow, with the average size now 3 times what it was just 9 months ago. Well, that's an interesting frame to think, like, well, they aren't making a lot of progress at the front. In fact, today was a really low day for attacks and casualties and things along those lines. Okay. Putin has significantly escalated the bombardment of Ukraine since Trump returned to the White House. And here is just a meet the press. This is NBC News. Here's where Trump came to the White House. Actually, if you just look at this, here's January 2023, January 2024, and then this was right around the November elections, and then January where Trump comes into office, and then there's this huge spike just before Trump comes to office, and then as Trump comes into office. I think the axis of whatever you want to call them is sending Trump a message. Okay, this is why anti-shot head drones are needed, says Sergei Sumileny. He does a great job with fundraisers, and he's done a massive job with that. Attacks in the last 31 days from August 1st forward, just look at the number of drones as they grew over time, especially in the last few days. 598 on the 28th, 537 on the 30th, and then today, just a few days later, there's a big spike here. Zelensky says all necessary emergency services, power engineers, railway workers are currently working to eliminate the consequences of Russian strike. Another massive strike totaling 526 striking means including more than 500 strike drones and 24 missiles. Dozens of residential buildings have been damaged in various regions of our country. Fire suppression efforts are ongoing. It's obvious that these are demonstrative Russian strikes. Let me read that again. These are demonstrative Russian strikes. They're doing this for an effect. They're poking the West in the eye, saying, what are you going to do about it? And it certainly requires response from the world. It's only due to the lack of sufficient pressure that Russia continues this aggression. He's absolutely right. Now, meanwhile, Zelensky is going to be meeting in Denmark with Northern Europe and Baltic States Summit. This is a day before he's going to be meeting with Trump in Paris with other members of the European Union. So Trump's going to be meeting Zelensky on September 4th. Today is September 3rd. Massive strike the day before. Trump's coming to meet with Zelensky. It's, again, a show of force. And Trump's not doing anything. And it's very, very frustrating to watch. It feels like that part of the movie where, like everything looks hopeless before they finally rally and win but this isn't a movie. This is real life. And it could just be that we're just being beaten by the side that wants it more, which seems to be the axis of autocracy. I hope that that's not the case, but they really do seem to want this new world order quite badly. Ukrainian government officials have stated that Russia is conscripting young Ukrainians into the Russian military once they turn 18, significant numbers of which were abducted from illegally and invaded and occupied Ukrainian territories as children. Some of them are reportedly being forced to take direct part in the conflict against their fellow Ukrainians. More than 19,500 Ukrainian children have been forcibly transferred or deported by the Russian authorities to mainland Russia and the illegally occupied territory of Crimea, with some open source reports estimating the total number of deported as high as 35,000. An estimated 6,000 Ukrainian children have been relocated to a network of re-education camps from which they are reportedly sent on military training depots and when they reach their late teens. Russian senior leadership almost certainly views, at least in part, abducted Ukrainian children as potential source of both current and future personnel for the Russian military. I think that's very fair. This is what they're doing, and they have been doing this. If we look at the map of the battlefield, we look at the number of here, engagements and casualties are below average. This is, again, to September 3rd. Total equipment and drone losses at record low. But there was also this massive overnight attack that was still ongoing by the time that this was put out. Across direction, we see 23 assaults. 23, that's low because there was only like 890 or something like that. I don't have this up here. Somehow I lost the particular image. 890, it was less than 900. I know that. So this is a pretty low number, and that's correlated with that low number of casualties. The battlefield's just not moving. And again, my thinking is that it's because of drones. Now, there's movement in the Crimea forest. 16,500 trenches inside, the most precise public mapping ever made of this battlefield. Look at this. So, and this is in a forest. But why? In a forest? Well, it's harder for drones to navigate there than openly over regular land. So this is actually becoming more of a battlefield, I think, as a consequence of that. I could be wrong about that, but it seems like that's a safer bet than moving through other places. Ivano-Franco Group has released footage showing strike of a Russian column of 7 armored vehicles. It's got like driving in the open in a column of vehicles used to be like, we're big and bad and tough and you can't touch us. And now it's, we have a big target on us. Ukrainian Navy has destroyed another high-speed boat of Russia's Black Sea Fleet in an attempt to deliver airborne troops to the Tendrivka Spit. A Russian heavy flamethrower was destroyed. Again, you're visible everywhere because of drones. And drone warfare pushes people to complete desperation. People try to turn anything at hand into a weapon to attack the drone. Radios, helmets, shoes, rifles, shovels, sticks, bricks. It almost never works. Yep. So that's where they are. That's the situation. Now, there is one hope, and that is that just the sheer corruption of the Russian army is one of the things that's retarding its movement. Russian commander denounces the Russian way of war as rot, greed, and hypocrisy, typified by rampant theft, corruption, greed among those providing goods and services to the soldiers, and among the soldiers themselves. Our way of war is rot, greed, and hypocrisy. Here on our section on the front, real enemies sometimes sit not behind the gray line, but right next to us with automatic rifles, with the same uniforms, the same flag on their chevrons, and only with zero honor in their souls. They steal everything that moves, and even what's no longer there: cars, motorcycles, generators, equipment. They steal everything from each other. Did an FPV drone knock out your vehicle? Was the crew evacuated? If the equipment was still somehow moving, consider it no longer yours. Even if there's a dead body in the passenger compartment, no problem. They'll take it along with the body. This is where they are. And all that's left is to be glad that at least the air is still free. This is how we live in a country where people are dying at the front while someone nearby is counting their profits, where the word comrade has been replaced by the word customer. All right, last little bit. The demands from Russia haven't changed. Russia is saying you still need to cede 20% of your territory. You need to disarm, international isolation, which means no NATO, so that you can't be supported later on if things come back again. A puppet government, rewrite Ukrainian history, official status for Russian language, privileged status for the Russian Orthodox Church. And Ukraine's demands are, leave us alone. I mean, that's it. And when we address this NATO one, I know I've showed you this before, but countries who joined or are considering joining NATO, have they been invaded by the USSR? Here's Sweden, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, Ukraine, Georgia. All but Sweden, and that's maybe just because of how far they are from Russia, have been invaded by Russia or the USSR. Have been threatened by the Russia or USSR, that's all of them. And has invaded Russia or the USSR, that's none of them. Yeah, NATO's a defensive alliance. All right, my friends. I know this was a more grim day than usual, but tell me what you thought about what you heard here. Why are they doing this now? I think it's a show of force. I think it's a lack of battlefield momentum. But they do feel, I think Putin and Xi and their cohorts, Kim and others, are feeling like they're on the ascendancy. Tell me what you think about that. Put that in the comments below. Thank you for the time, the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.